Uh, one of the funnier things is the Carl guy, Young or whatever the fuck his name is. Um, One of the things he said was to never point out um the shadow self in other people, as it creates a denial kind of thing where the person refuses to actually face the shadow self. Uh, and this causes a prolonged kind of thing, which is kind of funny because I'm hypercritical of people. And I actually create that, I guess, by telling people you have this thing, and instead of them just radical acceptance, they fight with it. It is one of the funnier patterns in my life. You talk about friend groups and archetypes and shit. This kind of cracked me up. Because I had this. I was being hypercritical of a kid. And this is not just a kid. This happened to me multiple times. I was being hypercritical of somebody. Specifically, it's always egocentrics. Where I point out where all their shortcomings are and all their fuck ups because I repress my aggression and it comes out as being hypercritical of everyone. Um, and those people always reject it. Um, I, I I could go on another story about my idiot friend Taco or this other kid I knew in middle school that was just a fucking cunt. But the important part is the people that actually did take my advice didn't take it from me because they resent me, therefore they resent my advice. They go, I hate that guy, so I'm not gonna listen to him. The person that does take the advice is the empathic friend. This isn't a joke. Um, for whatever reason, the narcissist, the egocentric, in their friend group have an empathic friend. And when I voice whatever hypercritical statement, let's say I'll go, man, this guy has a huge ego. It's you'd better not let him run wild with it, or else it'll overinflate and he'll start becoming a piece of shit. Or um, I'll oh man, it's that moment where you wish you could directly remember just all the events, because this is a thing. It's just there's always a person that has a friend that's an empath, and the empath is funny because after I chew the ass of the egocentric or whatever, they always resent me. They always refuse it. It's just like Carl says. It's a bad idea to interfere in other people's shadow work or their shadow cycle. Like, you shouldn't do that because it forces them to stay in it even longer because they're busy resenting you. They're teaching you a lesson by injuring themselves. It's just stupidity in my opinion because it's always been black and white to me. I've always been able to see it, you know. Um, but even funnier is the aspect of the the fact that there's an empath that does agree with me, and it surreptitiously works around the person's ego to actually communicate with the person, and it's always in secret. Instead of just saying, hey, Bobby's right and you need to listen to him, the individual, I don't know how they do it. I really don't. There was a manager I worked with at Papa John's. Amazing social skills. I was really good at pointing out people's shortcomings, and he was really good at approaching them from an empathic level and voicing my concerns to them without being a dick. And it is the bluntness of my nature where I just tell people like it is, and I'm cold about it. And I remember I had a teacher in fourth grade. She was I had to go to like counseling because I was abused, and I remembered her literally telling me like, "You're like taking bitter medicine." And she was like, some people will swallow that pill and most people won't. I was like, what? She's like, talking to you is like bitter medicine. You tell people bluntly, without caring about their feelings, how it is, and because you don't care about how they feel, they reject you. And she was like, you have to master or learn how to communicate in an effective manner, was her thing to me. And I just ignored her. And she kind of told me she knew I was just going to ignore her. Like, she was like, I already know. You're just going to, yep, I'm going to ignore you. Like, yeah, and I really wished I could think of a really good example of this. Because this was a thing that happened to me time and time again in school. Where somebody knew their friend was a loose cannon and out of control. And I pointed it out, and then the empath came to me and was like, oh, dude, you're right about this. And then dude, it's always like they circumnavigate the ego. Whereas I'm just like, right in the eco's face. Um, it's whatever, you know. I used to sometimes before even opening my mouth, I'd put my hand out for a handshake and go, "How's your ego doing?" And then I'm about to punch it. Fucking, I'd punch it. That just whatever. It's just one of the things I just remembered about myself. But that Carl guy was right, though. The people resist it. You literally, I guess, you can't just diagnose somebody and then tell them to get help. Because nobody wants to admit they're defective. Nobody wants to admit they're wrong in some way. Nobody wants to deal with that darkness. Because that means they're not good enough, or people might not like them, and blah, 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 not made up nonsense. Tacos fall apart and we still eat them, right? Or we still like them, right? The the other word is, I realize because I'm emotionally unavailable and I don't do emotions and all that stuff. I'm not, like I said, I'm not emotionally stunted. I just don't care for emotions because my entire, once again, I can say it 100 times, my entire life people have just ruined everything with how they feel. And I would argue Blondie's no exception to that, but whatever. I mean, what can you do about it? There's a world out there I can't control. Uh, the, as a result, I remember Bruce Lee had this thing about emotional content. Like, if you're gonna do something, you need to have emotional content. You gotta have the emotional drive. And when I was trying to go to court and I was just wasting all my money Ubering back and forth to Broward County and just doing all that work, and I was so driven. I have a theory that maybe my spiritual awakening was more of a, I was mentally burnt out from doing these things, and at the same time, I'm trying to force my brain to learn how to file Pro C, which it can't do. And I think what I did was burn out my brain. With all that will to power shit, I think only thing I managed to do was burn out my brain. And I think in that state, something about the, I guess, because you can only feel hatred and anger for so long before it burns out and you fall into a depression. I know because hatred is my core emotion, and regardless of, I'm not the Incredible Hulk. My brain can't infinitely produce the neurons to infinitely transfer rage and hatred and infinitely build. Unfortunately, nothing works on an infinite scale. And I guess part of Jung's psychology is learning to use the full spectrum of emotions outside of just one emotion to solve all your problems. There's a Japanese saying, when your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So, and I guess just like many people, I'm guilty of that myself, is just thinking of anything in that nature. But I realize due to my emotional unavailability, I lack drive. I do. And I guess it is that shit from Anal Eating Mummy God and Blondie where they're like, You're not driven. You don't try hard enough. Blah blah blah. Yeah. You're right. But on the other end of that spectrum is I have Pavlov dog syndrome, where I've just had this shit kicked out of me, and I'm tired. I don't care to try anymore because I'm tired from having this shit kicked out of me. I vaguely remember this story. I don't even remember where it was. It was about some dude that was like destined for greatness, and in the story ends bad. It has a bad ending because what happens is he just gets the crap kicked out of him again and again and again, and then this guy that's constantly like encouraging him, constantly Mr. Positive, constantly telling him to get up, constant at some point in the middle of the story, the guy literally just lays down, and the guy's begging him to get up and telling him to keep going because they're right there at the finish line, and the guy just doesn't have it in him, and he tells him he just runs over every loss, every defeat, and it doesn't matter if he gets over the finish line because he just doesn't care anymore. And the whole thing about the story is one of the worst things in the world you can ever do to a person is convince them to just stop caring. Because it always ends badly for everyone in that nature. And the reason the guy stops caring isn't because his friend's all positive. It is just because the world kicks the shit out of him. And it's just a fact. Nobody's gonna hit as hard as life. Like, life will fucking, you love a woman, the life will steal that from you, okay? You care about somebody, life will fucking murder it. It does not care, okay? Life doesn't give a fuck about you. It doesn't give a fuck about me, okay? Life will send a hurricane to wreck your shit. It does not care. But I think in that story is a great representation of just where I'm at. Like I said, my parents manipulated me my entire life, and now there's a bunch of bastards from Utah who want to manipulate me for the rest of my life. And they're going to harass me, and even if they give me money or a wife, it's going to be pseudo, it's going to be fake, and it's going to be them manipulating, and me just constantly pissed off. And a pissed off Bob with $4 billion. And I guess, baby, I remember this girl on YouTube was like, you need to think about when you want to crash out. Do you want to crash out poor with nothing, or would you rather crash out with $1 billion? And, I mean, arguably, I think anybody would probably want to crash out with $1 billion, but I simply do not have the emotional drive to go after it. And I'm not exactly sure 1,000,000% exactly what drives people. According to Adventure Time, the first thing that drives people is desire. I want that woman, I want that thing, and I'll do anything to get it. The second thing that drives people is fear, which I guess this church is an example of how fear can drive somebody. And the last thing is yourself. Yourself is supposed to be able to drive you somehow. I don't know how that works. I would argue it is probably, because they tell you confidence important, is it's probably tied to self-worth. The thing that gives you drive is you gotta have high self-worth. You gotta have some form of entitlement like Blondie. I'm entitled, so I gotta get everybody killed and ruin everything and get people put into human trafficking and destroy everything. It's all mine. I don't belong in prison. I just do all the bad things no matter what. Like, great. Yeah, I think Blondie's a great example of somebody who definitely just needs to sit the fuck down. Okay. But whatever. In lieu of the emotional unavailability, and this kind of, I remember this weird moment when Ganon and Stu were busy force feeding the belly girl to death. Where I was at Papa John's, and I just suddenly stopped and stared off into space. I do this sometimes. And I had the realization I didn't have any drive. to go do anything. And I remember feeling detached, but that happens when you have lead in your brain. And remember trying to figure out why I felt so detached. Like right now, I'm working on some kind of graph for the shadow self, like a kind of map. Like if you have these traits, then your shadow self has those traits. That way, there's like a cheat sheet. But I remember that Carl guy saying like you probably shouldn't expose that to the world because nobody out there is gonna like take that. They're gonna see that and be like, I'm not like that. I'd better fight the truth and sit here and do nothing and be stupid. Like great. I just wish we lived in a rational world with intelligent beings, but we don't. Yeah. I think this is, I think this is about, where we're at now. So, yeah, I just wanted to talk about that.